Hello, writers. Have you ever bought a writing craft book someone says you just have to read?
Is it still sitting on your shelf? Have you even cracked the spine?
That's totally me.
Don't ask Renee how many craft books she owns.
Why do we keep buying these books we never read?
We all want to improve as writers, but that's hard to do alone.
That's why we started the Words to Write By podcast, to tackle these books together, chapter by chapter, and learn from their advice.
Or not. Sometimes they're wrong.
Hi, I'm Renee Nelson, former college writing instructor turned full-time writer and podcaster. After many years, I finally have a complete draft of my memoir.
And I'm Kim Smagato, author of the humorous fantasy novel Our Comeback Tour is Slaying Monsters, which is the first book in the Boy Bands and Dragons series, released by Riverfolk Publishing.
And now, on with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to Words to Write By, and today we are not reading a book. We are doing some exploration on AI technology and writing.
Yep, the first in the series.
And before we get started, let's just talk about our process group, which is entirely human-based.
Here are the facts, folks. It begins at 5. You can find it on Meetup, or you can find it on our webpage. We hang out, we talk about writing, we don't workshop each other's work, and it's hella fun. Oh, and the most important fact, it's free.
And it's on Wednesday.
Oh, I forgot that.
Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Bam.
You can find the link on our website. You can go to meetup.com and search for Words to Write By podcast. We'd love to have you join us. We get a lot out of this, just meeting and coming together every week. And with that, AI.
Oh, boy. Boy. Full disclosure, dear listener. We've already recorded this. We went ahead and we did the whole episode in the closet. And at the end of it, we realized it went somewhere we didn't expect it to go. So here we are again on the same day, back in the closet, giving you another version. Kim calls it the cooking version?
The cooking show version.
The cooking show. What is the cooking show version?
The cooking show version means that everything's all pre-measured and set to go, and we get to see them do the work. But like actually when it goes in the oven for an hour, a finished pie comes out at that point.
Right. And let's just say that when we started, the pie came out a little weird.
Yep.
It was almost like sad pie. Like I think there were some tears in the pie.
There was definitely a, disappointment overall.
Which is really cool because it means, we were genuine in our shock about what AI could do. And we didn't know, but now we do. And we're going to give you the goods.
Okay, so the Authors Guild, which I don't really know exactly what it does, but it's an organization, has launched what they call a human authored certificate to preserve authenticity in literature. And the idea is that books that are written without AI can get this little sticker, and that way you don't accidentally pick a book written by AI. Now, that being said, it's very hard to write a book these days without some kind of AI work because of like spell checking and, word suggestions and even autocomplete of words. It's there. So it doesn't have to be completely written on a typewriter. What they say is that use of AI as a tool other than to generate text, such as for research or brainstorming, does not disqualify a book as long as the text was human written. So I looked at the term brainstorming. I use brainstorming for my work quite a bit. What I'll do is I'll be writing a section and I'm not sure what the next step is going to be, like a fight scene. What's going to happen with the monster? What's going to happen in this confrontation? I'll say I need to come up with 8 possible things, and I'll just write them down, like a couple of sentences each. And what it does is it kind of clears off the obvious solutions, and it forces my brain to come up with less obvious solutions. And often I find the stuff that I write later in the brainstorming session is what I use for the scene.
So this is a free write.
I mean, it's free write, but this is bullet points, so I can go back and like look at stuff specifically. Right. Free write, I kind of think of as like it just keeps coming to your head. You keep writing and writing.
Yeah, that's what I think of. I like bubble charts. Like I told my students, it'd be like, oh, draw a little bubble and put an idea in it and then have little branches coming off of it. And I would call that brainstorming. Mm-hmm. I would also call brainstorming in the sense of like a business where people are around like a table during a meeting and they're all shooting out answers.
Like what this product is supposed to look like.
Right. And people, writing on their whiteboard or whatever so that they can like get all the ideas together in one. Like brainstorm. Like if you even think of the words independently, it's just kind of a chaos, throw things out there kind of idea.
Right. When you're writing, it's a lonely process. You don't have a board of other people to throw ideas around. So an AI could be a really good, like, second person in the room to throw ideas off of.
Yeah.
In concept. When I see it listed that people are allowed to use AI for researching or brainstorming, I think researching, well, I want to write about a bomber plane such and such. What are some details? There's research where you're asking a question for the internet to tell you something, but then there's brainstorming where it's more nebulous. It's more like just I generate some ideas.
Yeah, the definition of brainstorming is a little weird, and how you would get this certificate by saying all you did was brainstorm might be kind of, it could go either in a dishonest way or a misunderstood way.
Initially, this focus was a little bit different, but it's kind of turned into, can we use AI to brainstorm ideas? And the format we decided to use was to go back to the very first book we tackled in our first season, John Gardner's The Art of Fiction. And man, we had problems with this book. But what he did put in the back was a series of exercises. And there were some good exercises.
Yeah, out of the books we've read, they're probably the most solid. Dear listener, if you have not gone back to the Gardner episodes, that's fine. You got a taste of one in the previous episode. Kim spliced in some old episode. You could tell by the sound quality, it was a little off. We were still learning back then. Anyway, we've done all these books, but this one particularly, although it had serious issues, the prompts were pretty solid.
And he divided his exercise in two parts. There was a bunch of individual writing ones, but there was also group exercises and questions for discussion.
I imagine this book was almost like a textbook for a beginning creative writing class. Like you would use this prompt as a teacher to get the students talking.
Mm-hmm. Specifically, we chose this one, which was plot a realistic short story. Begin with the climax and working backwards. What characters are needed for the climax and what are they like? What must be dramatized to authenticity? What must be dramatized to
authenticate the climax?
And how many scenes are necessary to achieve the climax? A lot of people will write a story and they don't know how to end it, or they'll write to the middle and they don't know where to go. And this solves the problem by saying, let's start at the ending and work our way back. And I do this sometimes too. It's like, I need to get the characters having this conversation. So what is the thing they say before that point? And what is the thing they say before that? And what's the thing they do? So I work my way back to get everything lined up. It's a good technique. It might also be good for helping people understand what the climax of the story is, what you're writing to.
Yeah.
I think one thing you run into is you get a bunch of students sitting around and they say, what's the climax? Well, there's a car chase scene. There's a murder. There's
the big reveal.
Yeah.
Or they might talk about a movie they had just seen.
But like very standard climaxes.
Yeah. Explosions.
Mm-hmm. Or the lovers reconnect.
Kiss. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what we're going from. Anything else you want to say before we get started? Any expectations you originally had?
So I had high hopes. I thought this will be great. So first, we are going to use the AI called Claude. It's not ChatGPT. What's the difference, Kim? Do you know?
Different companies.
Okay.
Different training.
Okay.
Different
this is more literary, supposedly. Don't quote me on that.
Our author friends have said that they like Claude because it feels more connected, more intuitive for writing stuff. But
sure, I didn't look into it. I hate research sometimes for the product, so I just believed them, and that's what I have is Claude. So we used Claude, and I thought they are kind of like a student. I imagine I have my students in a group around a table. There's 5 of them, and the 5th one is Claude. You know, it's going to act like another student, one that might be, you know, a little bit more in tune and faster than the other students. But that would be it. It would be interesting, and it would be a nice lesson in teaching students how one could use AI ethically, but still be able to have your own ideas.
And Claude would be ready to raise their hand and answer questions as opposed to just not answering questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we started with the prompt. Now, we didn't put the whole prompt in. We tried to break it up. So what was the first prompt we put in?
Okay. The very first thing we did was we asked Claude to give us examples of a climax from different realistic short stories.
That's part of the prompt here. We're not doing science fiction, fantasy, anything. We're sticking with realism.
And we're sticking with the prompt.
Gave us 7 examples. Let's put maybe the first 3.
Okay. Yes, it gave it 7. We found this text-to-speech app, and it sounds pretty good.
And it means we don't have to read it.
And it means we don't have to read it. And also, it's hard for me to not humanize the AI.
It's very hard not to humanize these AIs. They really do interact with you like a sweet little puppy that can talk.
Okay, so we asked Claude that question and came up with 7, and so we're going to give you the first 3. Here they are.
1. The confrontation. After months of suspicion, Marie finally confronts her business partner about the missing funds. In the silent conference room, with evidence spread across the table, her partner breaks down and confesses not just to embezzlement, but to gambling addiction that has destroyed his family. Marie's prepared anger dissolves into complicated sympathy, forcing her to choose between legal justice and human compassion. 2. The revelation. An elderly man cleaning out his deceased wife's belongings discovers a hidden packet of letters revealing she had maintained correspondence with her first love throughout their 50-year marriage. The letters show no infidelity, only deep friendship, but force him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about their relationship and his wife's inner life. 3. The decision point. After working 3 jobs to put her daughter through college, a single mother stands outside her own night school classroom, acceptance letter to her dream university in hand. She must choose between pursuing her long-deferred education in another state or remaining close to support her daughter who just announced her pregnancy.
Okay, I'm going to say that number 2 felt almost more like a setup than a climax.
Yes, it seemed like the beginning of a story.
The other 2 did feel like they were the climactic moment that would then proceed from there to the rest of the story.
Yeah.
The first one I thought was kind of interesting.
I think if we take a step back, when we look at these, or when I look at them, they're quite long. This isn't like a bullet point. This isn't like a summary so much as it reveals quite a lot.
Right. There's a lot of the story already there.
Yeah.
Which kind of defeats the point of this because, like, it says what the characters are. It kind of gives, like the emotional gist of it as well. It'd be harder for me, like, I wouldn't ask the next question what characters are needed for the climax because they're kind of already there.
Right. If a human student gave that example, I'd be like, damn, you're a good writer. Have you taken a creative writing class?
Like, do you watch a lot of films or something?
Yeah, like, wow, man, you're on the ball here. Like, you know.
So those were some examples. The one we liked was...
So this is not the 3 that we just shared with you, but this one seemed the most interesting out of the 7.
2 estranged childhood friends unexpectedly meet in a hospital waiting room. One waiting for news about a parent's surgery, the other having just received a serious diagnosis. After hours of awkward small talk, a shared memory breaks through their defenses, leading to mutual forgiveness for the teenage betrayal that ended their friendship 15 years earlier.
Okay, so let's say we're doing this as a workshop, came up with this as a prompt. There's still, how do we get to that point? Like, we could still do the whole working backwards.
Yeah, we could work backwards from this. I mean, it did a lot of the work, and people didn't have to think enough, in my opinion, in order to call that brainstorming. But you can still work with it. And so we did. We plugged it into Claude, and I asked, develop the recognition climax further by telling us the scene right before it.
So pretty clear. We want one scene right before it.
And it gave us 500 words.
Let's give the first 2 paragraphs.
Okay.
The waiting room's fluorescent lights cast a sickly pallor over everything. David had been sitting in the same hard plastic chair for 3 hours now, thumbing through the same outdated magazine without really seeing the pages. His mother's heart surgery was supposed to be routine, but nothing about watching your only living parent being wheeled away on a gurney felt routine. He checked his phone for the 100th time. No updates from the nurse, no responses to the group text he'd sent his cousins. Just the background photo of his kids at the beach last summer and the time, 8:47 p.m. The waiting room had gradually emptied as other families received their news and departed, leaving just him and a woman in the far corner, her face obscured by a curtain of dark hair as she hunched over her phone.
I don't think that's the scene that came directly before the climax.
No, this is like the beginning of a story. We asked for a short story, like climax, and a short story scene. This is like 2 of like the 10 paragraphs it gave us.
Right.
This is too much.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a brainstorm. That Claude wants to write the story.
Yes. And it's really fast at it, too.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So is this brainstorming, Kim?
I do not feel like this is brainstorming. The main issue I run into is it feels very complete. Like, part of brainstorming is it's rough, and then you've got something to start working on. And this, it's got the fluorescent lights, it's got the setup, and I mean, all of David's backstory. I like his cousins, his children, all of that.
Needless for me to say, but these are probably the first tears in the pie.
Something started to break inside you about this point?
Yes, I did not realize that AI had gone this far in writing. And now I'm seeing what's going on, and it's freaking me out just a little bit. So we gave him another prompt. We're like, no.
This is too much.
This is too much. Don't write the story for us, Claude. Don't do that. Don't be overeager, an eager beaver. Don't do it.
Bad AI.
Bad AI. No prompt. Not true. We did give it a prompt. This is the prompt. It said, give me a list of one-sentence summary of possible climaxes for a realistic story. So this might look more like a brainstorm, right?
They are long sentences.
Yeah. They're like 2 to 3 sentences worth, and gave us 15 examples.
1. After 2 years of sobriety, Jamie walks out of the bar without taking a drink, finally forgiving themselves for the accident that claimed their friend's life. 2. During her daughter's college graduation ceremony, Elena realizes she's finally broken the cycle of poverty and abuse that defined her own childhood. 3. In the hospital waiting room, Thomas and his estranged brother silently reconcile as they wait for news of their father's condition. 4. At her art exhibition opening, Priya sees her work through the eyes of others for the first time and recognizes she's been painting her trauma all along. 5. The moment Michael stands up to his intimidating boss marks the end of decades of allowing others to determine his worth. 6. When Lucia returns the expensive necklace she stole from her wealthy friend rather than selling it to pay her rent, she chooses integrity over immediate security. 7. After a year of writing rejection letters, editor James recognizes his own unpublished novel in the manuscript from an anonymous submission.
Now, a lot of these are actually kind of boring.
Yeah. The necklace one is boring to me.
Uh-huh.
It feels preachy.
Hospital waiting room seems like a repeat of that other thing. The graduation ceremony seems like a repeat.
It also seems like a story I've read a million times.
Drinking, like...
The intimidating boss would be kind of interesting, but, it seems like one of those comedies. In the end, I just want to punch my boss out,
I mean, because we told Claude to keep it to one sentence, it does start to become even more cliche because it's just one sentence. It's nothing that gives it any extra.
That's true. And also, if this is considered brainstorming, that's what you're going to get is some cliches at first, right? It takes a while to generate.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think one thing would be interesting to do is to take a single one of these prompts and keep re-putting it in. But for the purpose of this podcast, I kind of just want to see what we can get out of it. We found number 7 to be kind of interesting.
Yeah, the one about James, the editor, finding his own unpublished manuscript in the pile. I thought that was pretty fun.
I like those neat surprise,
Yeah.
And then we went back to the prompt that said, come up with different personalities. So we asked for 3 different personality types for James.
And it gave us stories. Serious stories. Okay, so
should we do 2 of them?
Sure.
1. The perfectionist James. James is methodical, exacting, and perhaps a bit neurotic. He takes pride in his reputation for finding flaws others miss. Every manuscript that crosses his desk undergoes his rigorous scrutiny, margins filled with his trademark red ink. This attention to detail has made him both respected and feared in publishing circles. His own novel remains unpublished because he's revised it 17 times, never quite satisfied. When he recognizes his work in the anonymous submission, it triggers both outrage and profound self-doubt. Someone else considered his precious work finished when he couldn't. The climax forces him to confront his paralyzing perfectionism and whether it's been protecting or destroying his art. 2. The cynical gatekeeper James. Years in publishing have hardened James into a jaded cynic who believes truly original writing no longer exists. He's developed a cutting wit and takes subtle pleasure in crafting the perfect rejection letter, simultaneously polite and devastating. His colleagues find him entertaining but difficult. His unpublished novel was written in his 20s, when he still believed in literature's transformative power. Finding it submitted anonymously forces him to confront the idealistic writer he once was and the bitter gatekeeper he's become. The climax represents his chance to reconnect with authentic creativity or permanently close that door.
Yeah, so this is a lot of story right there.
Yeah. This isn't just what kind of personalities are there. This is like a whole, the way a character would interact with their own story.
I mean, in a way, if you want a personality, you have to have little details that go into it. But not only do they give the details, like he's a perfectionist that's been working hard and that constantly writes everything up and is kind of feared and appreciated, but we actually go to what he thinks when he reads the story, what problems that's addressing, what the climax will result in.
Right. You know, it forces him to confront the idealistic writer he once was. That's not what we asked it. We didn't ask Claude for the conclusions this character might make. We just asked a personality.
Right. When we were doing Bird by Bird, she discusses how she comes up with stories where she just comes up with the characters and she throws them together and she sees what comes out. And that kind of like natural back and forth. Like, this person is complete. If we want to introduce another character in the story, we already have a whole bunch of stuff about James that wouldn't necessarily come out.
Exactly. And it does some extra steps, or he does more steps unprompted than it makes me feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. It just bothers me. And I don't like that. As a teacher, I'm like, oh, I tried to teach my students something and it doesn't work.
It's unnerving because, like you had said before, like if a student came to you with this stuff, you'd say, this is really good. And it's kind of nerve-wracking that we look at an AI stuff and said, this is really good.
Right. These examples are better than the student work I would read. This is probably the best student work I would ever read most of the time. People aren't this eloquent. You know, they're not that complete. I mean, I would get some really interesting stories.
It hits all the bullet points. One thing
does.
about beginner writers is often they're either too lazy or not quite aware, or they just need to get done and they miss a lot of stuff. And like you go back and say, well, what did James get out of, you know, why didn't he write this book? Oh, well, then I can come up with that reason. But like the initial version they give you has holes in it, which is part of the reason why you have brainstorming, to help people start filling in those holes.
Exactly. And this is doing not just the brainstorming, it's actually doing extra steps, which would make it really hard for people to develop that skill. Mm-hmm. You know, because brainstorming, well, is a skill. All of this is, you're developing your ideas, and that takes time. You know, there's the reason why they call it critical thinking.
Now, what I was noticing is that we only have one character in this story. And so we were thinking about different prompts. I came up with, let's figure out who the person that who sent the manuscript was.
Yeah. And it did give us some really interesting responses, some 5 possible anonymous submitters. We'll share a few.
1. James's college girlfriend, who secretly kept a copy of his manuscript after their bitter breakup and has spent years polishing it, believing in his talent long after he gave up on himself. 2. James's estranged twin brother, a struggling writer who has lived in his shadow, who stole the manuscript out of jealousy, but now, facing terminal illness, seeks to see his brother's work published as a final act of redemption. 3. James himself during a blackout drinking episode he doesn't remember, having subconsciously created this elaborate scenario to force himself to finally confront his fear of literary rejection.
Nice.
I mean, 2's delightfully like, I just love how many things it threw in. A twin brother, a struggling writer, terminal illness,
A drunk.
Jealousy, act of redemption. Like, you know, that's got like a whole...
Right. There's a love story in the first one. There's this versus kind of brother versus brother kind of thing. Mm-hmm. There's this internal conflict. Yeah. Claude has it down.
I mean, part of the frustrating thing with looking at what AI generates is it shows how kind of predictable we humans are. Like, these are all plots I've seen before. And yet at the same time, these are also plots that I would see again if they were done well. Like, I totally would see a twin brother writing a manuscript sort of thing. That just sounds like, and the same actor plays them both. Fascinating.
Right. So there's no such thing as originality. We all know this. It's how you frame it. It's how you turn it into you and how you tell the story. We like the same stuff over and over and over again. That's just how it is. And that is totally okay.
But boy, this is putting it right in our face, isn't it?
It is definitely putting it right in our face. Yes. That one was a little bit more like a brainstorm, but also gave us some very complete answers. So then we asked it, give us a list of bullet point scenes in order that would happen in the short story using James's climax and his personality where he's blackout drunk. I thought that was the funniest one, so we had to go with it. And this essentially fulfills the entire prompt, right? We're asking it now to go from the climax to breaking down all of the scenes, and it does.
And technically, the prompt was for us to work backwards. But AIs don't really work backwards. I mean, they work differently. They think differently. So they just give you a whole thing. I mean, it'd be an interesting exercise to see if you could make it work backwards. But that's the other part of this. I'm realizing prompts make a big difference too. And just writing a prompt in is probably not the right approach if you want to get something that assists you as opposed to just tells you what to do.
I guess so far it's very hard to see how these prompts specifically would help assist you as opposed to just doing the work for you. You would have to be very vague.
Or very specific.
Or so specific, yeah, that it wouldn't give you its whole self. Anyway, when we plugged this in 10 seconds, not even 10, I'm sorry, like 0.2 seconds later, it gave us pretty much an entire short story in bullet point form.
I think our listeners would like to find out what the story here
Are we
is.
going to give them the whole thing?
Let's give it to them.
Holy crap. Okay. There's quite a few. Okay. I will revise that and say it's not exactly a short story. It would be like a short story in bullet point form. But it is very complete. And you can just let that sink in. Should I number them or no?
Yeah, let's do numbers. So in answer to the number of scenes, Claude said 12. And I'm kind of wondering if 12 was just kind of a natural.
We'd have to ask somebody who programmed this. Yeah. Anyway.
Or we could run it a number of times and we could see if in every situation it gave us 12 bullet points for the scenes or not. That'd be kind of curious, but interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. So
here's the story you guys have been waiting for.
Yeah, this is the story.
James' story, key scenes. 1. James wakes with a pounding headache, dry mouth, and only fragmented memories of the previous night's publishing industry party. Not his first blackout from drinking, but concerning nonetheless. 2. At the office, James methodically works through the slush pile of manuscript submissions, drafting his usual eloquent but firm rejection letters, while ignoring concerned glances from colleagues who witnessed his behavior at the party. 3. James discovers a manuscript with no author information except an anonymous email address. The title Glasshouses triggers an uncomfortable feeling of familiarity. 4. As he begins reading, James experiences growing dread and recognition. The prose, characters, and specific turns of phrase are unmistakably his own from the novel he abandoned years ago. 5. A flashback reveals James' complex relationship with his novel, how he poured himself into it, then couldn't bear to face rejection, so he never submitted it beyond a single unsuccessful attempt. James investigates the mysterious submission, checking submission logs and questioning colleagues, growing increasingly paranoid about who might have accessed his personal files. 6. A memory surfaces from the party. James drunkenly complaining about deserving recognition while his colleague mentioned the anonymous submission option on their company website. 7. James discovers the submission was uploaded at 3:47 a.m. the night of the party, from his home IP address, but he has no memory of doing this.
The submitter's in the
8.
house.
He finds evidence in his apartment, his manuscript box open, pages disturbed, his laptop browser history showing the submission portal, and a cryptic note in his own handwriting, make them see. 9. James debates with himself about what to do, reject his own work again, pretend he never saw it, or, most terrifyingly, champion it through the publication process under the guise of an anonymous discovery. 10. In the climactic moment, James sits paralyzed at his desk, staring at the anonymous manuscript with both a rejection letter and an acceptance letter drafted, forced to confront why he created this elaborate scenario for himself. 11. James finally admits to himself that his fear of rejection has controlled not just his writing career but his entire life, keeping him isolated and increasingly dependent on alcohol to numb his frustration. 12. In the resolution, James makes a decision about the manuscript that represents his first step toward authenticity, followed by his attendance at his first recovery meeting.
Bam.
And I thought, listening through it, there are a couple parts in the middle where it's a little bit iffy. I think it would need a little bit of work, but really, that's the whole story.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end, it's a little vague. I guess if you wanted to use the climax, you would be like, okay, you could decide as the writer whether or not you were going to use.
Is he going to send it in or reject it or whatever? Yeah.
Right. Or, I kind of find it weird that AI didn't propose that he would resubmit it anonymously to a different editor within the group. But that was interesting. Suffice it to say that if you asked Claude to respond to the prompt in totality, it would just write you the short story. And that is not brainstorming.
Right, because we saw earlier for one, the other one, it actually sets the scene and gives some specific details and leads you along and all like jumps back and forth. It includes like the reflection within the various, it weaves them together. It's all there.
Oh, it's all there. So bringing it back to that article, when it said brainstorming is okay, what kind of brainstorming is okay?
Right, because I don't see how you can get the AI not to give you everything. Here's my other thing. When I'm looking at this, it's all there. There's nothing that actually stimulates anything in my own mind. That's the point where we just hung our heads and gave up, right?
Right, but I actually had an idea. I was going to ask it something else, something very specific, to see if maybe I could get it not to tell a story to me. So I'm just going to ask it, I'm having a hard time. As I normally do, telling a story about...
Oh, do you want to start a new chat so it doesn't go back to this other stuff? Why don't we start a new chat?
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise it's going to read everything you had beforehand. That's going to color what it says.
Okay, new chat. I want help with my story. I'm not sure what should happen next.
I want a suggestion, but I don't want to cheat.
Yep. I want a suggestion, but I want to be able to still have the Authors Guild certification.
Okay. So what's the specific thing you're asking for a suggestion for?
I'm telling a version of Cinderella in the modern day. I don't want the main character to have a fairy godmother, but something more dark, realistic, perhaps disturbing. Do you think I should be more specific about like the AI? What's the certification called?
Oh, it's called the Authors Guild Human Authored Certification. Let's see what it says. Whoa. Okay. And this is its answer. Oh, so it's also giving you other details too.
Oh yeah, it already predicted where things should go according to Claude. It's like that friend that tries to write it for you.
You have a friend that tries to write your stuff for you?
Well, the workshop members sometimes.
I'd be happy to help with your modern Cinderella retelling. Rather than a fairy godmother, consider these darker, more realistic alternatives. Instead of magical intervention, your protagonist could make a Faustian bargain with a powerful but morally ambiguous mentor figure. This could be 1. A wealthy family friend with hidden motives who helps by providing access to the ball/event but demands something significant in return. 2. An underground fashion designer/stylist with connections to criminal elements who transforms her appearance but pulls her into dangerous circles.
Interesting.
3. A tech billionaire who offers her a chance at social mobility through their app/platform, but is secretly collecting data or manipulating her life.
Wow.
Okay, so the first one was completely boring. The second one was really fun, and then the third one started to like really jam.
Yeah, it was like very modern telling. A billionaire, a tech billionaire. Wow.
With an app.
Yeah.
Manipulation.
But he's really just stalking her.
Or it could be, oh, actually, you know what? You actually came up with another idea based off what this was.
Yes, I immediately was like, what would happen? In fact, I already think of a few more steps too. I'm like, okay, yeah, he could be stalking her. And then she finds out eventually that there are other women in this app. The app she thinks he's helping her with is not that app, that he's been uploading personalities of different women he's been stalking to create a new app, a dark app for sex reasons or whatever.
Now, if we go back to the prompt that it gave you, because it didn't just give her this.
Oh,
It gave a transformation element, consider, a midlight deadline could be, and then a little summary on that. So actually, it jumped beyond you came up with ideas, but if you kept going and read the whole thing.
Yeah, I just asked for the godmother.
So
there has to be a transformation element because it's Cinderella story. It gave me examples.
yeah,
The midnight deadline in the Cinderella story. There's like 3 bullet points giving me ideas for that.
you didn't ask for that.
I did not ask for that. It's overstepping.
It is.
Also, I wonder if it knew about the Authors Guild thing. Like, I'm going to ask it, do you know about the Authors Guild Human Writer Certificate?
Now, I don't think that Claude is hooked up to the internet, but give it a try.
Claude's not hooked up to the internet?
Um,
I'm familiar with the concept, though there isn't an official Authors Guild Human Writer Certificate specifically. I thought there was.
maybe they're proposing it.
Okay. Has taken positions on AI writing, advocating for clear disclosure, protection of human authors' rights, proper attribution for human created works. My suggestions are meant to inspire your own creative process rather than replace it. And then it says we could use my suggestions only as inspiration, write the actual story entirely in your own words, or make all the creative decisions for yourself. Okay, thank you, Claude. Thank you. That's not really helpful. Remember the 12 bullet point list of the story about the editor and the manuscript? Mm-hmm. If I just went ahead and developed that whole thing in my own words and like turned it into a story, I still would consider it sort of AI written. It created the entire plot. And I don't think that that could deserve the human authored certificate.
Now, some people take fairy tale retellings.
Yes. Those are formulas. Those are plot formulas, fairy tales. I think those are different because it's pretty clear where you're getting your inspiration from.
We talked in a recently podcast with a romance writer, and she talked about tropes. And even with tropes, like, you know, the trope enemies to lovers, there's a lot of versions that could go into that. Even though the framework is the same, the details are different. But what Claude's been giving us is a lot of details. And the other thing I've noticed that Claude's been doing is it's been giving us themes and kind of the emotional connection and the why this is an important story. And for me, you could have the bullet points, maybe not quite all the details, but even the bullet points through about what happens. But somebody that writes it will come up with their own reason for why the character is in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons you read the same stories, basically the same stories from different authors, is that they each have their own feel for it. They each have their own experiences. They each have their own message that they want out of it. And one person's message is going to be a bit different. But here it's telling you what the message is too.
Yep.
Even more so than giving you a plot to follow, I find that really ties you in. You're no longer telling a story that has meaning to you. It's telling you what the meaning is.
Right. I kind of feel like one of the tests to see if something is like an author is using AI for brainstorming versus writing. Say an author is in an interview and they're being asked, where did you get the idea of the tech billionaire Cinderella story with this app and the creepy parts? The author would have to outright lie to not mention Claude. They couldn't say, oh, well, you know, I was thinking about, you know, these apps and how sinister they could be. And what if some billionaire really wanted to like create their own thing because they had so much money and it was like really creepy. And, you know, like I thought of sex workers and I thought of this tech billionaire and them trying to think outside the box to make a bunch of money. They would be straight up lying. They could not say where they got that story and not mention Claude if they were telling the truth.
That's true. Unfortunately, I mean, there are enough tech billionaires, there are enough dating apps, there are enough other stuff that it's a very believable set of things that would come together. Like you wouldn't be able to tell they were lying.
I think my point is it's not that you could tell that the author was lying. I'm saying that the author would have to lie. They got their own conscience to deal with, but if you had to lie in an interview, clearly you've used too much AI for your story.
Now, sometimes you don't really know where your ideas come from.
That's fine. You could forget you used AI, but the chances are pretty slim.
It's amazing what authors can forget. I mean, you look at the plagiarism cases, it's amazing what authors can forget they didn't write.
They conveniently forget, quote unquote. Anyway, can you brainstorm with AI? I don't know, Kim. Do you think you can brainstorm ethically as an author and claim that AI didn't help you and that it was human authored?
The question is, can you brainstorm with other people? And I think the idea is, yes, but you aren't submitting everything. You're bouncing off other people's ideas. What you were doing there with the Cinderella thing was a bouncing off of ideas. So if you just got a single tiny thing from an AI and you went and thought about it all day and you came back, I mean, that kind of is brainstorming right there. Well, here's what I want to say, which is the examples the AI put out are stuff that I feel like I could brainstorm if I sat down with a page. If I said I need to come up with 10 different possible ideas for this, I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't stumble on the billionaire. And I wouldn't have necessarily seen something to inspire me. I could just said, I just brainstormed until something popped out. So there are writers out there that have a dozen ideas before breakfast. And I'm fortunate to be one of those kind of writers. I almost never feel like I'm out of ideas. I might have some good ideas, but then I go away and come back the next day and I've got good ideas again. And then there are other writers that are trained differently. Like, you are beautiful in your writing. You're a trained poet. But narratives undoes you.
It totally undoes me. I suck at narrative. Narrative structure is so hard for me, and I don't know why.
And this is frustrating because this is doing narrative structure.
Clearly, there's some formula that I do not have access to.
So you've got a set of writers that can come up with ideas, and you've got a set of writers that maybe have only a couple ideas but are really great at writing. This is very tempting for people that are really good at writing but just don't feel like they're coming up with ideas. And it's a really easy thing to grab for.
Well, this is another reason why I wouldn't let my students write papers from home if I was teaching essays. I would just make them write in class essays for every paper. And that's sad, but it's such low-hanging fruit. It is so hard not to go for this.
But that's for essays that can be done in a single class. If you're doing creative writing?
Not sure what I would do. I really don't know. I really don't know. I mean, because they would probably use it. You couldn't blame them.
And you couldn't find it. Because if they use this as the outline and then they wrote from it.
Well, so here's the thing. It comes back, I think, to that discussion of would somebody read AI written stuff if it was totally like 10 years from now, everyone's going to be reading AI stuff. I don't think I will. Because a lot of the hidden literature, that literature that disappears, I'm not reading that stuff. I'm a little late to the party on a lot of books. I have other stuff to read, other older stuff to read that I haven't gotten to. I don't know. It's like something visceral in me. It most feels like if there's people using AI to write novels, people are just going to stop reading. Because what's the point of learning how to read anymore if you're not even learning how to write anymore? Because you won't be. But then we've got these audiobooks. Well, why do I even have to know how to read anymore? I can just do text to speech. Well, there'd be no text, right? Someone would read a story to me. An AI would generate the story, and then the AI would read it to me. I don't need to learn to read or write. It would just turn it into a movie.
And I can have it summarize my emails, and I can have it...
It would tell,
write my social media posts, and it can monitor other people's social media posts and tell me who's important.
And eventually we're just going back to talking to each other. A post-literate society, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we're not really talking to each other. We're talking to a screen. So it turns into WALL-E.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been a very depressing podcast.
Dude, this is tier pie. Like, I've cried so much into this pie. It's soggy. Yeah. How do you feel?
I mean, I'm rather disappointed that the AI can't help just a little bit, that it has to go all the way. And that even if there are ways to make it so it doesn't go all the way, most people coming to it aren't going to have that option. And I feel really bad for people that want to learn how to write creatively, because this is really kneecapping them. I mean, the fact that it's that good and the desire to want to just jump to that stage and work from there, I don't know. Yep. I mean, people still do hobbies. People do all sorts of silly hobbies. You can get incredible bread and people still like to bake bread. Sometimes their bread isn't as good. Maybe writing just becomes a hobby. I don't know.
I mean, it's always been a hobby, but some people can do it professionally. That's with everything. Some people bake. I bake. Do I do it professionally? No. Right? I do cross stitch. Like, who the heck in their mind does cross stitch anymore? I do. I mean, what do? You have little projects you do.
Yeah, I do the rock and jewelry stuff.
Beautiful rock jewelry.
Yeah, just kind of fun stuff to do. Anyway, so I think we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah, so the point of this episode was
man, we're screwed.
Yeah, it's really come down to we're screwed. When we sat down today, I did not predict this was going to happen.
We're hoping to do an interview with somebody that's an expert in AI so he can tell us just how screwed we are.
Yes. And he won't mince words. He'll tell us all about it. But we've also got a couple other interviews coming up about how some authors have successfully used AI. And I really hope and do believe that it would get the human authored certificate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like we said, come to our process group. If you want to talk about this episode, we'd be happy to hear what you have ideas on. And yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for listening. And see ya or listen to ya, whatever. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a great week.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Words to Write By is produced by Renee Nelson and Kim Smiga-Otto. Our theme music is Roll Back the Carpet by Cool Cat Music. Have a great day.
And it's weird because it makes you wonder where people got their ideas before, even though it wasn't that long ago before we had AI.